Braden Collins pressed the button for the garage door and waited for his beat-up 2009 Ford pickup truck to slowly roll inside. It had been a tough day at the factory. The conveyor belt in the fourth workshop had broken down, and as the senior mechanic, he had to deal with the problem. His hands were still covered in grease, despite washing them thoroughly before leaving work. He glanced at his watch. It was almost 8 o'clock. Sienna must be home by now. Their 5-bedroom house in the suburbs of Bakersfield was completely ordinary. There were hundreds like it in their neighborhood. They had bought it 3 years ago, spending almost all their savings on the down payment. Back then, they were full of plans for the future and enthusiasm. Entering the house through the garage, Braden immediately smelled the aroma of cooked food. So Sienna had made dinner after all. Lately, that had been happening less and less. She was staying late at work and coming home tired and irritable. Often they just ordered delivery or reheated frozen meals. "I'm home," he said as he entered the kitchen. Sienna was standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot. She turned and smiled briefly. "Hi, the pasta is almost ready." Braden walked over to her, intending to kiss her, but she pulled away slightly, pointing to his dirty work clothes. "Maybe you should take a shower first? You're covered in motor oil." He nodded, hiding his disappointment. His work clothes hadn't been a barrier to a welcome kiss before. Before when? A year ago? 2? He could hardly remember when their relationship had started to change. After showering and changing, Braden returned to dinner. Sienna had already divided the food between plates and poured wine, the inexpensive Cabernet they usually bought at the supermarket around the corner. "How was your day?" he asked, sitting down at the table. "Fine," Sienna shrugged. "New project at work, lots of paperwork. How about you?" "The conveyor belt broke. I've been busy all day." Over the past few months, their conversations had been reduced to such brief exchanges of information. No details, no emotions. Braden remembered a time when they could talk all evening, about work, plans, books, anything. Now they often ate dinner with the TV on in near silence. Sienna looked pensive, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't bring herself to do it. This was unusual. She was usually straightforward, even blunt. Something was definitely going on. "Is something wrong?" he asked, breaking the prolonged silence. She looked up from her plate, and Braden noticed a strange expression on her face, a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "I wanted to talk to you," she began, taking a sip of wine. "About us." Braden tensed. About us rarely boded well. He put down his fork and looked at his wife more closely. "I'm going on a date on Friday," she said in an even voice, as if she were telling him about her plans to go to the supermarket. He blinked, not understanding. "A date? With whom?" "With Ethan. He works in marketing. We've been talking for the last couple of months, and, well, he asked me out to dinner, and I said yes." Braden felt his breath catch. He had expected anything. A conversation about problems, about separate vacations, even divorce. But not this. You're telling me you're going on a date with another man? Is that what I'm hearing?" "Yes," Sienna straightened up. "Listen, I know how this sounds, but it's not what you think. You and we're stuck, Braden. We live like roommates, not like husband and wife. I don't feel that spark, that interest that was there before." "And you think going on a date with a coworker will fix that?" His voice was bitter. "I don't know if it will, but I know I want to feel wanted again, interesting to someone. Ethan is smart. He reads the same books I do. We discuss movies, art. So I'm not smart enough for those kinds of conversations," Braden interrupted. "That's not it," Sienna sighed. "You just stopped being interested. When was the last time we talked about anything other than bills and household problems? When was the last time we made love not because it was on the schedule, but because we really wanted each other?" Braden was silent. He couldn't argue. She was right. Their relationship had indeed become routine, but he never thought it would lead to this. "And you think it's okay to be married and go on dates with other people?" "I'm not saying it's okay," Sienna replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I'm just saying that I need it, and I've decided to be honest with you, not lie and hide things." Braden felt a wave of anger and hurt rise inside him. His first instinct was to stand up, yell, demand an explanation. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the realization that she was right about their relationship. Or maybe it was the years spent with a father who resolved all conflicts with shouting and fists that taught him to look for other ways. Instead of an angry tirade, he took a deep breath and forced himself to smile. "You know, maybe this is for the best." Now it was Sienna's turn to be surprised. "What?" "Well, I mean, maybe you're right. We are stuck. And to be honest—" He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've been thinking about going somewhere. There's a girl at the gym, Macy. She's a yoga instructor. We talk sometimes after my workouts." It was a lie. Braden only knew the yoga instructor by sight, a tall, slender blonde who taught classes on Wednesdays and Fridays. They had never spoken, and he wasn't even sure her name was Macy. He thought that was what it said on her name tag. But now he had to say something so he wouldn't look pathetic in front of his wife. You're serious?" Sienna looked confused. "Absolutely," Braden nodded, trying to sound confident. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we both need to broaden our horizons. And you're not angry?" "Why should I be angry? We're adults. And you're right. Lately it feels like we've lost something important between us." Sienna's face reflected a mixture of emotions, from surprise to slight disappointment. She had clearly expected a different reaction. "So, you don't mind if I go with him on Friday?" "Of course not," Braden shrugged with feigned nonchalance. "Actually, I was thinking of asking Macy out somewhere. Maybe on Friday, since you're busy." Sienna faltered. "I didn't expect you to react like that." "How was I supposed to react? Make a scene? Forbid you to go?" He grinned. "Would that have changed anything?" "No, probably not," she replied slowly. "It's just weird." "Life is weird," Braden said philosophically, taking a sip of wine. "So where are you going?" "Lavender Hill," Sienna replied, still looking confused. "It's a new restaurant downtown." "Oh, that sounds expensive," Braden whistled. "Your Ethan seems to be loaded." "He's not my Ethan," Sienna corrected. "And yes, he has a good job. He's a project manager." "Cool," Braden nodded. "I think I'll ask Macy out somewhere too. Maybe to that new Thai restaurant on Oak Street." Dinner continued in a strange atmosphere. The discussion of upcoming dates created a tension that hadn't been in their home for a long time. Sienna looked pensive, nervously twirling her wedding ring at times, a habit she had developed when she was anxious. After dinner, Braden helped clear the table and wash the dishes. Another routine, but today it felt different. They hardly spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. "I'm going to get ready for bed," Sienna said when the dishes were done. "Okay, I'll watch the news," Braden replied. She nodded and headed for the bedroom. He watched her go, thinking about the strange turn their life had taken. Just that morning he had been a tired husband in a marriage that was slowly losing its color. Now he found himself in a situation where his wife had openly declared her intention to go on a date with another man, and he himself had created a fictitious interest in another woman. Braden didn't know what would happen next, but he was sure of one thing. Their marriage had just entered completely new, uncharted territory, and he needed a plan. The next morning, Braden woke up before his alarm. Sienna was still asleep, turned away from him. With each passing year, the distance between them had grown, first emotionally, now physically. He got up quietly and headed to the kitchen to make coffee. Last night's conversation had kept him awake all night. It seemed unthinkable to him that his wife had simply announced she was going on a date with another man as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Even stranger was his own behavior. Instead of confronting her, he had pretended to support the idea and even made up a meeting with the mythical Macy. Sienna's phone was lying on the kitchen table. She always charged it there at night, a habit she'd kept from when they first started living together and promised each other they wouldn't bring their gadgets into the bedroom. It was amazing how some habits remained even when everything else changed. Braden hesitated only a moment before picking up the phone. 4 years ago, they had shared their passwords with each other. At the time, it had seemed like a natural expression of trust. He wasn't sure if Sienna had changed her password since then, but when he typed in her birthday and the first two letters of her maiden name, the screen unlocked. He felt a pang of guilt but quickly suppressed it. If she was willing to destroy their marriage, he had a right to know how far things had gone. Braden opened the Messenger app and found a chat with the contact Ethan Foster, marketing. The conversation was fairly active, but to his surprise, it contained nothing overtly romantic. Discussions about work projects, links to articles, comments on movies and books. Yesterday. So, what about Friday? Restaurant at 7. Yes, I'll be waiting. He checked his email and looked through his call history. Nothing special. No long late-night conversations. No intimate messages. If there was something going on between them, they were hiding it well or communicating in some other way. Hearing footsteps, Braden quickly put his phone away and pretended to be busy making breakfast. "Good morning," Sienna said as she entered the kitchen. Her voice sounded uncertain, as if she didn't know how to behave after yesterday's conversation. "Good morning," he replied, pouring coffee into 2 cups. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," she said, taking a cup and avoiding his gaze. "You're up early today." "Yeah, lots to do at the factory," he lied. In fact, the day promised to be completely ordinary. They ate breakfast in near silence. Braden stole glances at his wife. She looked pensive, frowning at times as she stared into her cup. Maybe she was already regretting what she had said. "What time do you get off today?" he asked, breaking the silence. 6, as usual, she replied. "Why?" "Just asking," Braden shrugged. "I have a workout after work today. I'll be back around 8. That was also a lie. He went to the gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and today was Wednesday. But he needed to create the appearance that he was actually seeing his imaginary yoga instructor. "Okay," Sienna nodded. "I'll make something for dinner." Half an hour later, they left for their respective workplaces. The day dragged on. Braden went through the motions at work, thinking about the situation with his wife. By lunchtime, he had a plan. He wasn't going to make a scene or beg her to stay. That would only push Sienna further away. Instead, he decided to play the same game she had started. After work, instead of going home, he stopped at the mall and bought a new shirt. Then he spent 2 hours at a cafe, browsing the news on his phone and periodically pretending to text someone, smiling at the screen. At 8 o'clock, as promised, he returned home. "Hi," he said, entering the kitchen with a bag from the store. "Sorry, I'm a little late. Me and Macy got to talking after practice." Sienna looked up from the book she was reading at the table. "It's fine. Dinner's in the oven, casserole." "Great," Braden smiled. "I'll take a quick shower and join you." Going upstairs, he took the new shirt out of the bag and deliberately placed it on the bed so Sienna would notice it. Then he took a shower, whistling a tune. At dinner, he was unusually lively, talking about work and asking Sienna about her day with a genuine interest he hadn't shown in a long time. "You seem different today," she remarked when he finished telling a joke he'd heard from a colleague. "Really?" He feigned surprise. "Just a good day." "Is it your yoga instructor?" Sienna asked, trying to sound casual, but Braden detected a hint of tension. "At Macy's? Well, Maybe, he smiled. She's interesting. We talked about traveling today. She was in Thailand last year and showed me some photos. Amazing places. That was another lie. Braden had never been particularly interested in traveling. He preferred to relax closer to home, surrounded by nature. But he knew that Sienna had always dreamed of seeing the world and had often reproached him for his lack of interest in other countries and cultures. "That's great," Sienna said, but her eyes betrayed her concern. Did you ask her out?" "Not yet," Braden replied, "but I'm thinking of doing it on Friday, since you'll be busy." The rest of dinner passed in a strange atmosphere. Afterwards, Braden washed the dishes and then settled down in the living room with his phone. He smiled from time to time as he looked at the screen and even chuckled once, although he was really just scrolling through his news feed. Sienna sat in the armchair opposite, pretending to be engrossed in her book, but Braden noticed her glancing at him from time to time over the pages. "Who are you texting?" she finally asked. "Oh, just a colleague sent me a funny video," he shrugged. At that moment, his phone actually rang. It was Craig, his best friend since school. "Hi," Braden answered, trying to make his voice sound especially warm. "Yeah, I'm home. No, I'm not busy at all." "Sure, tell me all about it." He laughed at something Craig said, glancing quickly at Sienna. She was no longer pretending to read. She was openly watching him. "Listen, I'll call you back in 5 minutes, okay?" He said into the phone. Then, covering the microphone with his hand, he turned to Sienna. "I'll go out to the back porch so I don't disturb you reading." He left the house, closing the door tightly behind him, and immediately explained the situation to Craig, whom he knew well enough to trust with such things. "So you're pretending I'm some chick from the gym?" Craig was clearly amused. "Dude, that's such a dumb plan, it might even work." "I hope so," Braden sighed. "I just don't know what else to do. I can't lock her in the house." "Well, make sure the game doesn't go too far," his friend warned. "You don't want her to actually go on this date, do you?" "Of course not. I hope she changes her mind before Friday." When he returned home 20 minutes later, Braden found that Sienna had already gone up to her bedroom. Her book was lying on the chair, the bookmark still on the same page as before. The next morning, he woke up early again and checked her phone. This time, there was a new message from Ethan. "Looking forward to Friday. I booked a table by the window just the way you like it." There was no reply from Sienna. Braden also checked her work email. The password hadn't changed in years. Nothing suspicious, just work correspondence. However, in one email, a colleague named Paulina mentioned, "How's your Friday plan coming along? Eloise says you're making a mistake." Eloise? The name sounded familiar. He thought Sienna had mentioned her before, a colleague from the neighboring department with whom she had developed a friendly relationship. Over the next 2 days, Braden continued his game. He became more attentive, smiled more often, creating the appearance of a man who had suddenly found a new interest in life. Every evening, he found an excuse to make a private phone call, during which he was actually talking to Craig. Craig was already getting tired of the charade, but he continued to support his friend. Sienna was visibly nervous. She became more attentive and cooked his favorite meals several times, something she hadn't done in a long time. One evening, he noticed her checking his phone while he was in the shower. Of course, she found nothing. All the conversations with Macy existed only in his stories. On Thursday evening, when he was about to call the back porch again, Sienna suddenly stopped him. "Braden, we need to talk." He nodded and put the phone away. "Sure. What's wrong?" I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," she began, sitting down on the sofa and gesturing for him to sit next to her. "About Friday." "Your date with Ethan?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "If you're worried about my reaction, don't be. I really understand." "It's not that," she shook her head. "I talked to Eloise today. Do you remember her? We met at the company party last year." Vaguely, Braden replied. Tall, dark hair, right? Yes. She's going through a difficult time right now, Sienna sighed. You see, she also started seeing a colleague a few months ago. Her husband found out 2 weeks ago. And what happened? Braden asked, though he already had an idea where this was going. They had a fight, a big one. And then Weston, her husband, tracked down this guy and… She paused. Anyway, he's in the hospital with a concussion and a broken jaw, and Weston's under investigation. Eloise is torn between them, visiting her lover in the hospital while her husband is being questioned. That sounds awful, Braden said. But what does that have to do with us? I don't know, she said, wringing her hands nervously. It just got me thinking. I've never seen you aggressive, but… On the other hand, I didn't think Weston was capable of that. He always seemed so calm. Are you afraid I might hit Ethan? Braden asked bluntly. No. I don't know. It's all so complicated, she looked up at him. And then there's you and this Macy. I didn't expect you to find someone else so quickly. We're just friends, he replied, trying to sound sincere. Just like you and Ethan, right? Yes, but… She didn't finish her sentence, as if she didn't know what she wanted to say. But what? Braden prompted her gently. But you seem so happy these days. I haven't seen you like this in a long time. Braden felt a pang of guilt. His act had worked too well. Sienna really believed that he had found someone who made him happier than she did. Maybe I just needed a shake-up, he said, trying to smooth things over, to realize that life doesn't stand still. So you're still planning on seeing her tomorrow? Asked Sienna. Braden hesitated. His plan was working. Sienna was clearly having second thoughts about going on her date with Ethan, but if he said he was canceling his plans now, she might see it as weakness and decide that her date could go ahead. Yeah, I think so, he finally replied. What about you? Are you still going with Ethan? Sienna was silent for a long time, staring off into the distance. Finally, she said, I don't know, probably. I already agreed, so it would be weird to cancel at the last minute. Of course, Braden nodded, hiding his disappointment. I understand. The evening ended in awkward silence. They had dinner, watched some TV, and went to their separate rooms. Sienna went up to her bedroom and Braden stayed in the living room, pretending to be engrossed in a sports program. Later, lying next to his wife in bed and listening to her steady breathing, Braden wondered what would happen next. His plan hadn't worked, or at least not completely. Sienna had her doubts, but she was still planning to go on her date with Ethan. He had to come up with something else. Tomorrow was the day, and he had one last chance to prevent what could be the beginning of the end of their marriage. Friday morning was cloudy. Braden lay awake, watching the early dawn through a crack in the curtains. Sienna was breathing quietly beside him. Yesterday's conversation was still on his mind. Despite all his efforts, she was still planning to go on a date with Ethan. Perhaps his strategy had been misguided. Instead of winning his wife back, he had only pushed her to the conclusion that they should both seek happiness elsewhere. He carefully got out of bed, trying not to wake Sienna, and went down to the kitchen. While the coffee was brewing, Braden thought about his next move. Should he continue pretending to be interested in the non-existent Macy? Confess the lie? Make one last desperate attempt to convince Sienna not to go on the date? He heard soft footsteps and turned around. Sienna was standing in the doorway, wrapped in a bathrobe. Her hair was tousled and her eyes looked tired, as if she too had been awake most of the night. Good morning, Braden said, handing her a cup of coffee. Good morning. She took the cup but didn't take a sip. Can we talk? Sure, he nodded, pointing to the table. They sat down across from each other. Sienna stared into her cup as if hoping to find the right words there. I'm not going on my date with Ethan tonight, she finally said. Braden felt his heart skip a beat, but he tried to keep his expression neutral. Why not? He asked. Because of what happened with Eloise? Partly. Sienna took a sip of coffee. I talked to her for a long time yesterday. It turns out the situation is even worse than I thought. In what way? The guy she's been seeing, it's Jason Kelly. He works with Ethan in the same department. They're friends. And it's not just a coincidence. She looked up at Braden. Ethan was the one who introduced them. He kind of plays matchmaker in the office. Eliza isn't the first married woman he's rescued from a boring marriage, as he calls it. Braden didn't know what to say. He had expected anything but this. Weston didn't just beat Jason up. He tracked them both down, Eliza and Jason, when they were leaving the motel. He made a scene right there in the parking lot. Jason tried to protect Eloise, and Weston lost it. Now Jason's in the hospital, and Weston's under house arrest awaiting trial. Their marriage is ruined. And you know what's the worst part? Sienna smiled bitterly. Jason hasn't even called Eloise. As soon as things got serious, he disappeared from her life. Now she's dealing with this whole nightmare on her own. I'm sorry to hear about your friend, Braden said cautiously, but I'm glad you canceled the date. It's not just that. Sienna shook her head. I've been thinking a lot about us, about why I even decided to go on that date, and I realized that I've been using Ethan as a way to escape the problems in our marriage instead of dealing with them. Braden sighed deeply. Sienna, I have something to confess. Macy doesn't exist. Well, there is a yoga instructor at my gym, but I've never spoken to her. All those calls and messages, I was just pretending. I wanted to make you jealous. I thought if you saw that I could find someone else, you'd change your mind about your date. He expected anger, disappointment, resentment, but Sienna just smiled faintly. I had an idea, she said. When you suddenly became so animated, started talking about traveling, which you never wanted to hear about before, it was too unexpected. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wasn't sure, and because I guess I liked seeing you fight for our marriage, even if your methods weren't exactly honest. They sat in silence, looking at each other across the table. Outside, it started to rain, the drops drumming on the eaves. What do we do now? Braden finally asked. I think we need to have a serious talk about our marriage, Sienna replied. About what's not working and how to fix it, if we both want to. I want to, Braden said quickly. I never wanted to lose you. I don't want to lose what we had either, she said, reaching across the table and touching his hand. But we can't just go back to how things have been for the last few years. We need to change something. I agree, he nodded. What do you suggest? Maybe we should make some kind of agreement, Sienna suggested. Write down what we expect from each other, what we want. The idea seemed strange to Braden, but something in him responded to the suggestion. Maybe they really did need some kind of structure to get out of the rut they were stuck in. Okay, he agreed. Let's try it. Sienna stood up, took a notebook and pen out of the drawer, and returned to the table. Let's start with what's not working for us, she said, opening a blank page. For the next 2 hours, they talked more openly than they had in years. Braden admitted that he felt unappreciated, that he felt like Sienna was ashamed of his job and education in front of her college-educated colleagues. Sienna confessed that she missed intellectual intimacy, that she was tired of feeling lonely even when they were together, that sex had become a mechanical act without emotional connection. They talked about boredom, routine, and unfulfilled expectations, about how Braden stopped asking her out on dates and Sienna stopped taking an interest in his work and hobbies, about how they both started taking each other for granted. I was never ashamed of you, Sienna said with tears in her eyes. On the contrary, I always admired how you solve practical problems, how you understand things that are beyond me. I just stopped telling you because I thought you already knew. And I always thought you were the smartest and most interesting woman I knew, Braden replied. I just thought you were bored with me, so I stopped trying. By noon, They had a draft agreement, a list of promises and expectations written on paper. They agreed to weekly dates, phone and TV-free time, trips together, and to share their thoughts and feelings rather than keep them to themselves. They agreed that Braden would sign up for the evening Spanish class he had been thinking about for a long time, and that Sienna would help him with his homework. They agreed that Sienna would go fishing with him, and he would take her to a contemporary art exhibition. Most importantly, they agreed to be completely honest with each other and never seek emotional or physical intimacy outside of their marriage without first discussing any issues between them. "I have to call work," Braden said, glancing at his watch. "Tell them I won't be in today." "Me too," Sienna nodded. "I have some time off." They called their bosses with plausible excuses, and then Sienna wrote a message to Ethan canceling their date. She showed the message to Braden before sending it. "I'm sorry, but I can't meet up today. I really shouldn't have agreed to a date when I'm married. I hope you understand." "What are we going to do today?" Braden asked when the calls and messages were over. "Maybe we could start with lunch out," Sienna suggested. "We're supposed to be on a date now." "Great idea," he smiled. They spent the day together, had lunch at a small restaurant they hadn't been to in years, walked through the park in the drizzling rain, stopped at a bookstore where Sienna picked out a book for Braden and he picked one for her. In the evening, they returned home and cooked dinner together, talking about everything that came to mind, from politics to their favorite childhood cartoons. As they lay in bed that night, Sienna suddenly said, "I saw Ethan today when we were at the bookstore." "Really?" Braden tensed. "Did he notice you?" "No, he was on the other side of the room. He was with Jason, the guy Eloise's husband beat up. Jason looked pretty beat up. His arm was bandaged and he had bruises on his face, but they were both laughing as they picked out some magazines." She turned to her husband. "And you know what I thought at that moment? That I almost made a huge mistake, that I could have destroyed everything we have for a man who doesn't really care about me." "I'm glad that didn't happen," Braden said quietly, hugging her. "Me too," she said, pressing herself against him. "And I'm glad you fought for us, even if your methods were a little questionable. Next time, I'll just say straight out that I don't want to lose you," he smiled. "There won't be a next time," Sienna said seriously. "At least, not like that. I promise." It was the first night in a long time that they fell asleep in each other's arms. 3 months later, Braden and Sienna were sitting in the backyard of their house. It was a warm summer evening, and they were grilling steaks and sipping wine from glasses. On the table between them lay their contract. No longer the original draft, but a more thoughtful document they had drawn up together with a family counselor they had started seeing a week after their candid conversation. Not everything was perfect. They still argued, sometimes got annoyed with each other, sometimes forgot their promises. But now they talked about it and didn't let resentments build up. Braden had indeed signed up for Spanish classes and was attending twice a week. Sienna went fishing with him and, to his surprise, fell in love with the process. Not the fishing itself, but the quiet, the nature, the opportunity to sit next to each other and just be together. They kept up their weekly dates, even when they were tired or busy. They learned to listen to each other again and, more importantly, to hear each other. "I got a letter from Eloise today," Sienna said, watching the sunset. "How is she?" Braden asked, turning the stakes. "Not bad. The court gave Weston a suspended sentence and community service, plus damages to Jason. She and Eloise are trying to save their marriage and are seeing the same counselor we are. She says it's hard, but they're trying." "I'm glad for them," Braden nodded. "I hope it works out." "Me too," Sienna raised her glass. "To us?" "To us," he clinked glasses with her, "and to ridiculous plans that sometimes work." She laughed, and in that laugh Braden heard the girl he had fallen in love with so many years ago. She had always been there. They just both needed to remember how to see her. Rebuilding their marriage hadn't been easy. It had been daily work, a conscious decision to choose each other every day. But looking at his wife, bathed in the soft rays of the sunset, Braden knew it had been worth it, and it would be worth it every day of their life together.